Hi there, this is Doug Zanes. Welcome to my weekly show. Today, I want to talk to you about car accident. Well, really two topics. One is car accidents that happen in Mexico, and then also car accidents that happen in the U.S. That involve somebody who has come to the U.S. from Mexico. So, for those of you who have listened to my weekly show before, you're aware that I'm a personal injury lawyer. I have offices in both Tucson and Phoenix, Arizona, and we're actually one of the biggest personal injury law firms in Arizona. And Arizona is on the Mexican border. In fact, our offices in Tucson are probably a 45-minute drive from the U.S. Mexico border. And so it's a relevant topic, certainly to people who live in border states, whether it's California, Arizona, and Texas, for sure. But my guess is it's relevant to people who live in a lot of other states as well. And so let's start with car accidents that happen in Mexico. We have lots of people, excuse me, in Arizona who actually drive their vehicles into Mexico, whether it's for the day or a vacation. Lots of people from Tucson and Phoenix drive across the border to Puerto Penasco, Mexico, which is a beach town across from Arizona. People in California drive down into Baja, Mexico. And so what happens is if you drive your car into Mexico, the first thing you want to do is make sure that you have insurance coverage on your vehicle. Most insurance companies, whether it's Farmers, State Farm, Liberty Mutual, don't cover your vehicle when it's in Mexico. So once you cross that border, you don't have insurance coverage. Now that's most policies, not ours, and not all, I should say. And the reason I say that is there are some policies that will, for example, provide coverage to you, up to a certain distance within Mexico, let's say 100 miles. And, and that's helpful and that's a good thing to have, if it's part of your auto insurance that you currently have here in the U.S. But I personally wouldn't, if you have that coverage, I wouldn't simply accept that as being all that I needed if I'm driving my vehicle into Mexico and choose to not get an insurance policy that specifically is designed to cover me while I'm in Mexico. Because you never know what all the caveats are to your policy. Are you 101 miles in when the accident happens and you have no coverage? All of those things. So it's easier, or it's actually more responsible to go and get a Mexican insurance policy. And it's easy to go. Easy to get. You can go online and Google auto insurance coverage for Mexico, and a number of companies will pop up. You can typically purchase it all online, print out the documents that you need, and you're good. You've got your coverage. And those policies are generally sort of flat coverage policies. Let's say $100,000 flat coverage that'll provide you with uninsured, underinsured motorist coverage for yourself. It'll provide you with liability coverage in case you get into an accident in Mexico and you're responsible for it. And it's important to have that coverage because my understanding has always been if you get into an accident in Mexico, you will typically end up being taken down to the police station by the police until you can prove that you have either insurance coverage to cover the accident or money, quite frankly, the financial ability to compensate everybody in the accident. And this is even if the accident wasn't your fault. And so the easiest way to avoid that is to simply have insurance coverage that you can show them that's a policy that's specifically designed to cover you in Mexico. And I base all this on, for years, my family and I would drive down to, quite honestly, Puerto Penasco. We had a house down there, and we had to deal with all of these things. But I can tell you, we also have represented people who have been in accidents in Mexico. And I'll give you some examples, and it'll kind of help to clarify the issues and your options. One problem with the policies that that cover you in Mexico is, I think a lot of them actually say that if the at-fault party is the driver of the vehicle that is insured, and the other passengers are family members, there's limited coverage or no coverage for those family members, which is a problem. Because again, most people purchase insurance to protect their family members. So that's something you need to look at and you need to be aware of. One example of an accident that we have represented people on is this. An accident occurs in Mexico, but it occurs between two U.S. citizens. So again, down in a lot of these areas where somebody from the United States would drive their vehicle to, there are other people from the U.S. that drive their vehicle there. And there are lots of accidents, quite honestly, that happen, for example, on the highway in Mexico between the border crossing and Puerto Peñasco, Mexico. And, if you're driving your vehicle and you get into an accident with somebody else from the U.S. and it's their fault, we can handle that case just like we would handle any other case in the United States, even though it happened in Mexico. I mean, you can sue the person in the U.S. You bring a claim against their insurance coverage. Now, one of the challenges becomes if that person who's at fault, even though they're from the U.S., didn't purchase insurance coverage to cover them in Mexico, then it becomes a challenge as well. Even though you can sue them in the U.S. Again, what we're typically looking for is insurance coverage, and that's why you having coverage that provides you with uninsured, underinsured motorist coverage in Mexico is very important. So that's one example of of the kind of accidents that we have helped people on. Another example is, for example, we had a client who was volunteering for a church group. And the group was down in Mexico building houses for people who needed houses. And so, our client went into Mexico in a church van. While in Mexico, that church van was hit by a truck that was driven by a Mexican citizen. It was a Mexican truck. It didn't have insurance that we were able to get a hold of. And so we had to kind of walk through all the steps to try to either collect against the church, because the church set the outing up and it was a church vehicle, and the insurance on the church. I can tell you it really was a challenge. It took us a very long time to sort through it and get our clients compensated. But in the end, it worked out fine. And so, that's an important piece, because one of the challenges that we had in that case is because our client, who was a U.S. citizen, was involved in an accident in Mexico with a Mexican citizen, we really don't have a way to sue that person effectively, and get them served with a lawsuit and bring them to justice in a U.S. court. And so, that's the problem. And that's why insurance coverage is so important. And when I say that, I mean insurance coverage specifically designed to cover your vehicle and everybody in it in Mexico. So you don't just go with your Farmers or State Farm policy. Actually purchase a separate policy for your trip into Mexico. And you can purchase it specifically for the length of the trip, for the 10 days or the 2 days or whatever it is. So it's not as if you have to pay a whole bunch of money for all kinds of insurance coverage for a long period of time that you're not going to need. And finally, what we see pretty regularly, quite honestly, especially down here in southern Arizona, so Tucson and south of Tucson, are drivers who come across the border from Mexico into the U.S., whether it's for vacation, for the day, for business, whatever it may be, and get into an accident with somebody in the U.S. And the first thing we look for is insurance coverage similar to what I've talked about. That I recommend that as you know, that if you go into Mexico, you buy an insurance policy to specifically cover you in Mexico. Well, at the border, people coming from Mexico to the U.S., so Mexican citizens coming to the U.S., can actually purchase insurance coverage to cover them, specifically cover them in the United States while they're here. And so that's what we always have to look for. So that's the first thing we look for. And surprisingly, I found that most of the time we're able to find that coverage on the driver. But it becomes difficult because if there's an accident and the police didn't come out and prepare a police report, and somebody didn't get that information ahead of time, then it can be a challenge for us to get it later. So you want to make sure you get that information at the time of the accident. That's very, very important. Just so you have it, so we know what it is. And so what happens with those policies is it can become very challenging because generally there are one or two companies, in my experience, out of South Texas that handle the adjusting side of those claims on those policies. And those companies are very difficult to deal with, even just from purely a communication standpoint. And this is my opinion. I don't necessarily have any facts to support this, but in my opinion, those companies really drag their feet and are intentionally really difficult to deal with because they know you really are going to have a difficult time suing their client if they've gone back to Mexico, after the accident. And we're not able to find them and we're not able to sue them. And so we still have statutes of limitations to deal with in order to bring our claim. The claim's not any different than any other claim. So if you can't get it settled, you do have to sue. So you have all these sort of challenging factors in that type of case, which allows those companies, to be more difficult to deal with, quite frankly, in the hopes that they'll be able to get the case done for less, at some point. Because of all those factors. And so that's very important. If you're in an accident with somebody who's a Mexican citizen, you really want to make sure you get their insurance information before you leave the scene of the accident. And details. Person's full name, whatever address you've got, if they've got an ID that you can take a picture of with your phone, you want to get that. You want to get all the complete information for the insurance policy that they have, including the policy number, the phone number that you call to make claims, all of those things, who was driving, or what the name of the driver was, all the detailed information. Now, if the police come out and prepare a complete report, hopefully it's all there. But again, many times, for example, in Tucson, the police won't come out to accidents anymore unless they're severe injuries. And so, you, the driver, have to make sure you get that information. So those are the basic ins and outs of making a claim when there's been an accident in Mexico. If that ever unfortunately happens to you, either an accident, you're in Mexico and you're involved in an accident, or you're in the U.S. and you're involved in a car accident with somebody who's a Mexican citizen and you've got any questions, you can feel free to email me at dzanes, Z-A-N-E-S, at zaneslaw.com. And one final thought, actually, that just popped into my head before we end for today. We also get contacted by a lot of people who go to Mexico for vacation. Meaning they don't drive into Mexico, but they just go to Mexico for vacation, and something happens. They slip and fall and they get hurt, things like that. Normal everyday accidents, but it happened in Mexico. And some of the time we're actually able to help those people get compensated. It just depends on a lot of factors. But one of the main factors is ultimately who we think is responsible. If it's an accident or an event on a hotel property, there are many hotel properties in Mexico that we can bring a claim against in the U.S. That's possible. It's something we certainly can do if we have the right connections between, quite frankly, that hotel chain and the United States. Maybe it's owned by a U.S. Parent company. Maybe it's a Mexican company, but they also have hotels in the United States. So there's a way for us to sue them if we need to. And again, even if it is just, let's say, a Mexican company, a lot of them are insured, through big U.S. insurance companies that we're able to kind of make claims with and get people compensated from. And so, if you're hurt in any way in Mexico and you're interested in seeing kind of what your options are and, what you can do in order to get compensated, again, feel free to email me. If we can help you, we're happy to. If for some reason we're not, but you actually have a claim that you're able to pursue, we can certainly connect you with other law firms in other parts of the country that we partner with who could help you as well. And so that's it for today. Thank you for tuning in this week. And until next week, have a great few days.